let's bring in this morning's Knights of the Round Table. Very good to have with us political consultant Mario Moro back again. Political strategist Jill Alper is with us, Detroit Free Press columnist Nancy Kaffer, and State Representative Abdullah Hammoud. Thank you all very much for coming. You all come from very different perspectives on what you've seen thus far. But Jill, you've been around a lot of campaigns. I want to start with you just over what we watched happen over the span of 5 or 6 days last week. I've never seen anything more extraordinary in primary politics than watching the chairs shuffle.
Yeah, it was sort of like the Wild Wild West, right? Pew, 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 you know, where are the bodies, and all of that. But yeah, you saw major forces and different parts of the parties sort of mouthpieces, standard bearers, issue advocates, one by one, choose to exit the race. There were results, there were conversations, and there was movement. And never so much, I think, by so many who had been around for so long, that were so resourced, choosing to act as they did in surprising ways that weren't even, I think, anticipated by those following the race all the time. Yeah. It was a stunt. Mario, one thing also that it led me to believe is that Iowa and New Hampshire are as antiquated an idea as ever, because the people a lot of the folks who did really well there were gone in the blink of an eye. It really is time to do this.
And we got to give Vice President Joe Biden some credit for that, because he basically said, "Hey, I don't think I'm going to do too well in these two caucuses. However, when we get to South Carolina, I'm going to show you what a real leader looks like, or actually gets votes, and especially from African Americans, because they're going to put me on." He made a prediction at the debate. I'm going to win South Carolina, and the African American vote is going to put me over.
You are not going anywhere as a Democratic candidate if you don't have support in the African American community, which brings me to Abdullah, Bernie Sanders, who you were, I believe, the earliest at the Capitol to support Bernie Sanders.
Correct.
This problem, though, that he seems to have, in fact, he's kind of now passing on a number of southern states, going to focus here in Michigan. Terribly important for him next week to win the state that he won in the primary before. But if you can't reach into the African American community, it's really tough to win as a Democrat, isn't it?
It is. I think for Bernie Sanders, you've seen that he really is the campaign with the largest organizing effort across the country. He is winning amongst a very diverse coalition, the young people across all races and demographics. He's winning the second largest voting bloc in the country, which is the Hispanic vote as well. And here in Michigan, you'll see that he's also winning amongst the Muslim vote and the American vote, which I think will provide him a decisive victory, hopefully, come the Michigan primary on Tuesday.
Nancy, your column this past week, I think, registered with a lot of women who have watched yet another very strong woman candidate not make it to the final cut. You wrote kind of was almost a very wistful, nearly a love letter to watching Elizabeth Warren's campaign dissipate.
You know, I read a lot about policy. She is a policy queen. Like, it was really wonderful to have this candidate a woman candidate who could tackle such substantive issues with really great comprehensive programs, actual plans to get us to these progressive solutions. And yeah, it was heartbreaking to see her not do well.
And I think the best debater, probably, and I keep saying, I think in some ways the fiercest thinker of the pool, and yet it wasn't enough.
She's kind of too good for us, right?
I don't know that, well, clearly voters didn't think so. But as I said off the top of the program, Jill, we had this really diverse pile of candidates to start. We had an Asian American. In fact, we had two really young candidates in. We had women. We had African Americans, and in the end, we end up with two old white guys.
Right, and well, and GLBTQ. So many dynamics at work, you know, gender bias, which is even unconscious gender bias for some voters. They don't even know how these things impact them. But what I will say is that I think it's a win for the Democratic Party. There is some, you know, always fatigue while these conversations are going on, but new people are becoming engaged as a result, and the conversation has been about Donald Trump still, even though there were disagreements, sometimes big, but generally the values were the same and the platforms were the same. Some of the plans may have been more specific, but I will say that for all of the pew 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 in the last week, that there'll be some peace here, and we've got just a couple weeks maybe before we have
I don't know.
A presumptive nominee.
The Bernie Sanders crowd that I remember covering in Philadelphia at the DNC in 2016. 2016 was unlike any political group I've ever been around before. Mario, they're not being talked into supporting anyone else.
No.
They're not going along to play nice.
Right.
And many of them have never been involved in politics before. It took Bernie to get them. So how do you make peace out of that, I
Well,
guess?
first of all, it all depends on what happens in Michigan and Wisconsin.
Well, let's get to that. What happens in Wisconsin? What happens in Michigan on Tuesday?
This is so tight right now, but the momentum is with Joe Biden. The momentum is with Joe Biden, and if he gets his support base, primarily the African Americans, to come out to vote in his favor, then I think that it's going to go in his favor. I'm giving him the edge right now. But Michigan politics, anything can happen. We've seen Jesse Jackson, George Wallace. We've seen Bernie Sanders be Hillary Clinton.
16.
Anything can happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But one more point that I want to piggyback on something you had mentioned about the right now we have 2 white guys on the top of the ticket. Let's say 3. Let's count Trump because he's going to get the nod on the Republican side. This is going to be
Well, you
so
can still
important.
count Tulsi Gabbard, I guess, but go ahead.
But this is going to be so important for the vice presidential pick. And I'm thinking that, first of all, it's going to have to be a woman on the Democratic side. It's going to have to be a woman. And to some degree, maybe African-American woman.
Maybe.
I want to point out that we're all clear that Bernie Sanders won the primary in Michigan in 2016, but he lost the vote in the city of Detroit by 42 points. So, Joe Biden has support in the African American community.
Yep.
What's going to happen in Michigan this time? Has Bernie expanded his base among African Americans in Michigan? If you can't turn out Detroit, if you can't turn out other places where there are big enclaves of black voters, it's not going to happen. This election's not going to be decided by people who look like the 3 of us.
Well, interesting, Abdullah. In fact, so many people have made Bernie Sanders' primary win 4 years ago about Hillary, that it was a sign of trouble, that she wasn't really reaching out to Michigan. But maybe, I think the way you see it, it was really more about Bernie and the way that he connected with a lot of Michigan.
I think it was about expanding the electorate. I think it was about organizing on the ground. I mean, he's hosting several rallies over the next several days. You see his campaign offices all across the state. There is nobody that has knocked more doors or dialed more on the phones than Bernie Sanders' campaign collectively. I think he has a platform that speaks to this idea of dismantling this system that really hasn't worked for the average working family.
Labeled as a socialist platform.
Well, I was going to say, one of the reasons why all of this happened in those last 5 days is there clearly was a lot of fear about Bernie Sanders being the standard bearer for the party. Why aren't you more afraid about an avowed socialist who really refuses to condemn Fidel Castro as much as everybody would like him to? I mean, he clearly doesn't seem as risky in the general election to you, but he clearly does to many Democrats.
I mean, he's not risky. I mean, let's look at his democratic socialist platform, Medicare for all. I don't know why it's such a radical idea to believe that we should spend $12,000 out of our pocket before a health insurance company spends a dime. I don't know why it's so radical of an idea that myself sitting here before you, I have $350,000 of student loan debt. Why is it radical to think that there should be an ability to find a pathway to tuition-free college for all? Why is it radical to vote against endless wars? These are things that Bernie has a consistency, he has the authenticity, and he has the voting record to support, unlike the others currently in the race.
I think what's radical is the idea that we can get there in 4 years with a Congress that is going to look a lot like the Congress we have now. And I would kind of posit that if we really had a huge appetite for democratic socialists, that we probably would have elected more of them to things.
Jill, am I using the right word? Is it fear from a lot of Democrats of what Bernie would be in the general election then?
I think it's a practical concern. I think Nancy touched on something, which is what is the public's appetite for this kind of, it would be radical change. I don't mean radical as ideas, because we all agree on the principle that everybody should be insured. How do you get there? And can you get it done? And I think that's a lot of what we saw come out of South Carolina into Super Tuesday, where large states all over the country taking a look and saying the number one thing in all polls pretty much is beating Donald Trump. And I think Democrats on the ticket were afraid to be running underneath or are concerned about running underneath those kinds of ideas.
But if we look at the polling pertaining to the issues and the policies that Bernie's advocating for, they overwhelmingly win across the board, across the country. And we need somebody who's not only going to beat Trump, but who will enter office and be able to push forth an agenda. Now, you may think that we want a candidate who's moderate, more centrist, but we're not going to get the types of changes that we need that are going to help the everyday working families. Bernie Sanders can go in on day one, can help push the agenda. But secondly, on a foreign policy level, here is an individual who can assume the presidency and from day one really reshape our foreign policy, unlike either candidate, because he has that authority as president.
But as a member of the legislature, you know that one person without like-minded people voting around them, an idea really doesn't count much for an idea if it doesn't have a chance of succeeding and turning into action.
Unless you're able to organize and mobilize and build coalitions, and I think Bernie has shown time and time again his ability to build coalitions. He has passed more amendments on the U.S. Senate
I think a lot
floor.
of people like the fact that he's more of an island.
But he's passed more amendments on the U.S. Senate floor than any other senator. I mean, I think we see his ability to actually get things done.
Well, what I would be really thoughtful about if I were a Sanders supporter or Sanders himself is that thus far, the people most impacted, disproportionately impacted by the status quo, unfavorably impacted, are people of color. And let's see what happens Tuesday, because so far they're not really en masse.
We have not probably, I only got about 30 seconds left, Mario, but a lot of people are worried that Joe Biden, though, is just a few gaffes away from blowing up at any moment, that he's just sort of scatterbrained too often.
A lot of people are looking at who can beat Donald Trump. And the win goes more in favor of Joe Biden than someone who's labeled as a socialist, that people really don't even understand what socialism is all about. I think that it's going to come down to whoever proves their way with the voters as it relates to their philosophy.
I'll just push back on that because we said the same argument with Hillary Clinton, and we saw what happened in 2016.
I got to get to a break. Thanks, gang, very much for the conversation. We'll wrap things up right after this. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. Yeah.